Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to my tutorial on using PuTTY and your SOIS web space server in order to clone a repository, a Git remote repository on your SOIS web space server. No, that's the title. I'm going to have to shrink down before I put it onto YouTube, but that's what we're doing. I'm recording this for my fall 2016 senior capstone classes, but I think we'll probably be using this again. So you may be doing the same skill for another class. So in the last of the tutorials I did, I did a couple so far. First of all, I showed you how to set up a SOIS web account if you didn't have one. And then, since I'm trying to concentrate on people using the Windows operating system, I showed you how to, I had another tutorial. It showed you how to install PuTTY, the terminal program for Windows. So if you haven't done either of those, you probably want to stop here and go back and find each of those tutorials and get that done. But if you have those done, then you're ready to be here. So let's go to the Edge browser and let's find help for our SOIS web account. Okay, so if I go to sois.uwm.edu, that'll bring up our SOIS website, and then under resources, we have the resources of the IT department. And if we look under there, we'll see student web space. Open that up. And the last thing that we list under the student web space is a how-to tutorial for the SOIS student web space. I just want to point out there's also a link here for how to reset your password, which I think is probably a favorite activity. So let's go to the tutorial for the web space. Okay. And the beginning of it says you have to use this for SOIS related learning activities and all that kind of stuff. How to access the web space? Well, we've already done that. How to access and modify your web space? Well, we're going to use the third alternative we have here, SSH access. Okay. And we're going to, and what's that going to allow us to do? It's going to allow us to log in to the server that contains our SOIS web space, and it's going to allow us to work at the command line. And the protocol that we're going to be using is called SSH. And on Windows, the application that we're going to use is called PuTTY. On the Mac, there is a program that's part of the utilities called Terminal, which does essentially the same thing. And that's built in. So how are we going to get there? Well, we need the URL, uwmsois.com. Okay, so let's remember that URL, and let's go find our way to PuTTY. So we'll shrink this, and I've got a link here on my desktop for PuTTY, so I'll double click on that. And let's see, host name or IP address. Okay. And we were told that it's uwmsois.com. Okay. There's nowhere here to give our user ID, so usually you put the user ID up front. So my user ID is Trainer K. So trainerk at uwmsos.com. Port 22 is the standard port for SSH. Okay. And let's say we want to save that. So let's save this. Okay. And the reason we want to save it is when we come back the next time, we want to be able to load up a saved one and not have to remember it each time. Okay, so we currently have this one loaded up. Let's click on Open. And usually the first time it says that you don't have a server's host key cached. Do we want to trust this host? And I'm going to say yes. And what we have here is we have a prompt for the password for the account trainer K. Okay, well that looks good. So that's the same password that I've been using for my account all along. Okay. All right, that's good. And if you haven't worked at the command line, there's some commands you're probably going to want to know. There's the ls command, which will show you what's in your current directory. And we're probably currently at the home directory for my ID. Okay. Trainer K. So let's see, what do we have? Well, we have access logs, etc. logs, mail, Perl 15, public FTP, public HTML, temp, etc. And one of the things I'm seeing here is I'm really not getting the kind of visibility to the type that I'd like to get. So I'm going to try to find my way to the, that's the full screen. I'm going to try to find my way to the settings for this. And I'm going to change the settings so that we can see better type on here, because this is not working very well. So I'm going to give it a pause and I'll be right back and make it a little bit easier for you to see. Okay, I found my way. So how do I change the settings for PuTTY? Well, I go up to the tool, the title bar here, and I right click, I get the menu, and I see there's a change settings. So I go there, and what I want to change are the colors. So it's under window colors. And it turns out that these last two boxes in this first grouping, attempt to use logical palettes and use system colors, they seem to give me what I want. So I click those on, I click apply, and now we're seeing things a little bit better. Maybe the turquoise color for access logs is not everything I'd like it to be, but it's certainly better. Well, actually, let's try it without those logical colors. So let's change the settings again. Colors, I'm wondering if that will solve our problem there. No, it won't. All right, so we'll leave it just the way it is here. So this is the directory that we're in, okay? It holds all these subdirectories, is actually what most of these are. And it turns out that where we're going to want to put our content is under the subdirectory public_HTML. So how do we change directories? Well, to change our working directory to one of our current subdirectories, we type cd, change directory, space, and that we don't put that in there, and then we type the name of the subdirectory, so public_HTML. Okay, And you can see that we're in this server, and we're in the public HTML subdirectory, which is where we want to be. Okay, so this is actually the place where we want to place our Git repository. So again, what we're doing for the senior capstone class, we have a common static website that I created and that we've all begun to modify, and we put it under version control using Git. And we have a common repository. There is a remote repository on Bitbucket, and most of us have already accessed that, and we have cloned that to our PCs or whatever a computer that we're using to do the work for the class. We've changed the page that we're responsible for, and we have committed that change and pushed those committed changes up to the remote repository. So now what we want to do is we want to clone the repository right here on our web server, such that we can always pull a current copy of the content onto our web server. So where does the content go on our web server? Well, it goes under the public_HTML subdirectory. So that's right where we want to work. Okay, so let's look at a couple of more things. Okay, another thing that we want to do is we want to look at another web page. And what's the web page that we want? Well, we want to be able to refer to the Git book that I told my students about in the beginning of the semester. And this book is called ProGit, P-R-O space G-I-T. And it just happens to be available for free in electronic form. So we're going to click on that. And this is good. And now what we're going to do is we're going to we're going to have to set up our account. We're going to have to configure Git to know who we are as the user, and a couple of other things, so that we'll be in the position to actually clone the repository from the remote site at Bitbucket. And the section that tells us how to do this is section 1.6, first time Git setup. Okay, so this is where you're going to be working. Okay. And one of the first things you have to do, I don't know why this won't pull, should be pulling. Good old Edge. I don't know why Edge is not responding, but it's not. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to lose our patience with Edge, and we're going to open up Firefox and see if we get better help from Firefox. So ProGit again, and ProGit book. And we want section 1.6, first time Git setup. We don't want to give them a reader review. Okay, and this one will scroll. That's good. And the part that we want to do is the Git software is already installed on the SOIS server. So what we need to do is we need to configure our information into our Git configuration files such that it knows who we are. Okay, so there are two commands that we need to use. We need the command is git config dash dash global, and then we want to set the user.name parameter to our name in double quotes, and then we want to set the user.email parameter to our email address. Okay, so let's go do that. What's that going to look like? Well, we're just right here. We want to be in the public HTML directory. Okay, we can use the git command line client from anywhere, but this is the right spot for us to be working. So git space config space dash dash global space user.name space, and then in double quotes I'm going to put my name, Kevin Trainer. You of course would put yours. Okay, and then the next one is git config dash dash global user.email. And you don't have to put this one into quotes because it doesn't have any internal spaces. So my email is trainerk@uwm.edu. Okay, so how can I be sure that I set these? Well, if in fact you put these in without the parameter value at the end, it will echo back to you what it's already set to. So I can use the up arrow to go to the last command and the up arrow again to the command before. So I'm just going to get rid of the parameter value for username, and hit enter. And yeah, the username is set to Kevin Trainer. And again, I can use the up arrow key again and find user email. And again, I don't want to set the email again. I just want to query it. So if I issue that without the parameter value, yep, that's my proper email address. So I have configured both my username and my user email. So then when I go to tell Git that I would like it to clone something from another server, it knows how to identify me to that Git server. Okay. Now we don't typically put in our password when we go to do the cloning. It's going to ask us for our password. Okay. So how do we do cloning? Well, let's take a look at the documentation for that. Okay, you're certainly free to read the book, and you can look at all these things. I'm going to go up to the top of the page, and I can click on chapters. And what I want to find is section 2.1, Git basics, getting a Git repository. So 2.1, getting a Git repository. Let's look at that. And it says we're going to clone an existing repository. That's just what we want to do. So there's a couple of bits to it. One is that we want to be in the right spot. Okay, so the spot for us is we want to be just inside of the public HTML directory, and that's our current directory right now. How do we know that? Well, let's just take a look. We're in public underscore HTML, so we're in the right spot. Then we need the right command. Okay, so the right command is we say git clone, and then we use the URL for our remote repository. Okay, let's do that. So let's go and get the URL. And to do that, I'm going to go to Bitbucket sois.org. And it looks like I'm already logged in. Okay. And I can go to my repository. This happens to be the repository that we're using for the current class. And if I click on that, I'm going to get in the upper right, with all these resized windows, I'm not getting what I want. But up here in the upper right, we have the URL for our repository. So I'm just going to triple click, okay, to highlight that, and I'm going to right click and say copy, and now I have that. And now let's go back and remind ourselves what we're going to have to do. We're going to type in git space clone space, and then we have the URL. We've done that with copy. Okay, so let's go to PuTTY. So git space clone space, and we ought to be able to right click, and you don't have to paste. As soon as you right click on the line, on the end of the line, it pastes it for you. You could also use a Control V. So this is the full URL. Okay, so all we need to do now is to press enter, and it'll do some thinking. It wants to know our password. Okay, so I'm going to type in my password. And now we're going to see this coming down. Okay, and let's take a look at this. Okay, so how do we see what's in our directory now? Well, we can do an ls. Okay, and inside of that public HTML subdirectory, we have another subdirectory, and that's the repository, repo 2016 fall INFOST 490. Okay, and so let's go down and see what's in that. cd change directory space repo 2016 fall INFOST 490. Okay, and do an ls again, and there we are. So we have index.html, there's an instructor index.html, there's a team index.html, then there are sub directories for CSS, images, instructors, and students. Okay, that's everything that we had when we introduced this website when we were there before. Okay, so at this point we have deployed the site to our web server. How do we go find it? Okay, let's do that. So let's, to tell you the truth, I'm done with this PuTTY client. Okay, if I leave it long enough, it'll time out. If I want to get out of it, I can just type. You can type a couple things, but EXIT does very well, and it will go away. So that's the polite way to end one of these terminal programs. Okay, so we're out of that. And now let's go back and get another browser window. We seem to be doing better with Firefox. So let's use Firefox. And how do we find our way? Well, if you remember, your web account is your ID. So mine's trainork.uwmsois, all one word, .com. So here I am, and look what I have here. I have another directory that I can see here. That's the the subdirectory that holds the repository that holds our site. If I click on it, it'll go right to the index.html page. Okay, so let's look at what we have here. I'm going to take a look at my sample student. Okay, and I've changed this a couple of times using a couple of different I've changed it on my own PC. I've changed it on the virtual PC that I've been using for these tutorials. So it's been changed 3 times. So today I just made a change a little bit earlier today, and I took out all the content and I put in a message that said that at this point I had done 3 things. Okay. So that's it. So let's talk about this. So we found our way to the website and we can find it. Now, that was kind of goofy. We went to just the URL for our web account, and then we saw a menu. Well, that's not very user friendly, right? Okay. Is there a URL that would take us directly to the index page? And there is. We can see it here. So trainerk.uwmsois.com / the name of the directory that holds the repository /. So when you give a URL that points to a subdirectory, the default behavior for the Apache web server is to look in that directory and look for an index.html. Well, isn't that what we're looking at? So we can take this URL as it exists right here. We can copy it, and then let's just get another new browser window and paste in that URL. And you can see that you can go directly to our site. Okay, so that's how you know you have our site. How do you know you have the most recent version of our site? Well, the only way that you can know that is you can go down and pull down the most recent changes. I'm going to show you how to do that in the next of our tutorials. Now, what if you want to change content on the site? A lot of people might think it's a good idea to do it on the server. Well, I'm going to talk you out of that. Okay? The workflow that we have is that we're going to do our changes to our code on our own computers, right? We're going to test it there. So we're going to do coding. We're going to do unit testing. So we'll change our page, for instance, and then we'll test it. And then once we have that, then we'll commit the change. Okay, having committed the change, we'll push our change to the remote repository. And to get our copy on our own web space current, we will log in with PuTTY or the terminal program if we're working on the Mac. We're going to log into our SOIS web account command line, and we're going to go to the same spot, and instead of doing a clone, we're going to do a pull. Okay? And we're going to do all of that in the next of the tutorials. So that's about everything we wanted to do here. And I've already logged out of my PuTTY terminal. I'll close my browser, and I'm all done. So that's it for here. I'm going to say bye until next time. Bye-bye.